Good day. I respectfully welcome you from Brussels, where the European Union's Foreign Ministers' Council meeting is taking place. I respectfully welcome all those who are following us live on public media channels, on the news television, or on any internet platform. Today, the European Union Foreign Ministers' Council discussed many important issues, as the relationship between the European Union and China, the Middle Eastern situation, the new Syrian situation, and even the tension between Congo and Rwanda were on the agenda. But I assume, perhaps rightly and justifiably, that at home, everyone is much more interested in the agenda item about Ukraine. But if we want to delve into the details of other issues, I am naturally at your disposal. If I had to briefly summarize what the lesson is from today's agenda item about Ukraine, I could say the following. Now, even our own European rules don't matter. Brussels is prepared to violate every existing rule just to be able to drag the entire European continent into war. What prevails here in Brussels can only be adequately described figuratively as war fanaticism. Practically in Brussels and in several European capitals, they have decided that the functioning of the Ukrainian state, the arming of the Ukrainian army, and their war will also be paid for by European people. We have now reached the point where there is talk of building Ukrainian weapons factories. Here they euphemistically refer to this as investment in the Ukrainian defense industry, which is supposedly the best investment in Europe's security. But obviously this is a nonsense assessment. The Brussels people want the European Union's military training mission to also be transferred to Ukraine. This is an absolute red line. Hungary will not allow this. We will not contribute to this under any circumstances. This would be an escalation risk that is impossible to take on. An escalation risk that would also put Hungary and the Hungarian people in serious danger. Thus, Hungary naturally did not and will not contribute in the future to the European Union conducting a military training mission on Ukrainian territory. There is very serious intention and pressure for this, but we resisted this today as well. Naturally, the most substantial part of the agenda was the financial resources to be provided to Ukraine for the next period. Within this, the so-called use of frozen Russian assets, it became clear that here in Brussels they made a decision ridiculously disregarding European rules about frozen Russian assets, because altogether they want to give 80,000 billion forints to Ukraine. Here, of course, they express this in euros. This is roughly 210 billion euros that they want to give to the Ukrainians. This is 80,000 billion forints. This is an unforeseeable, opaque, huge sum. Moreover, of this, 46,000 billion forints they want to spend on arming Ukraine. They would spend 46,000 billion forints on arming a country neighboring Hungary, not belonging to the same integration as Hungary, not a NATO member country. And they want to send 80,000 billion forints to a country where corruption is organized at the state level, where a war mafia operates, and to a country where we have no idea what the money sent there so far by European taxpayers was spent on. The argument by which the European Union circumvents the unanimity requirement in this matter practically makes ridiculous and discredits every future statement by the European Union about the rule of law or democracy. The European Union violates its own rules to such an extent that here not just the horse's leg is showing, but practically the complete stable. The European Union claims that Russian assets must be frozen for a long time because the Russians are creating an energy emergency in Europe. This is a huge lie. To consider people this stupid, even in Brussels, is unacceptable, I think. The energy supply crisis is not caused by the Russians in the European Union, but by the fact that Brussels is now phasing out Russian energy carriers from Europe, then citing this to create a legal basis, a non-existent legal basis for itself to circumvent the unanimity criterion. So this argument from now on discredits and makes ridiculous every statement on behalf of the European Union regarding the functioning of any member state's democratic institutional system, and discredits and makes ridiculous every European Union statement regarding so-called rule of law procedures. It is deeply contrary to Hungary's interests, to the interests of the Hungarian people, that they want to send 80,000 billion forints to a corrupt political regime. It is deeply contrary to Hungary's security interests that they want to arm a neighboring, non-NATO member country with 46,000 billion forints. Therefore, you can be sure that as long as there is a sovereign national government in Hungary, the Hungarian people's money will not be used either for the functioning of the Ukrainian state, for financing Ukrainian corruption, or for arming Ukraine. It was mentioned, naturally there was enormous pressure on us today. I also want to make clear regarding Ukraine's EU membership that we Hungarians do not regard EU membership as a security guarantee given to the Ukrainians, but we regard it as a war threat to Europe. Ukraine's admission to the European Union would mean a huge war threat to the entire European Union. We are not willing to assist in importing war into the European Union. There is also a large dose of frustration naturally among Europeans, because no matter how much they try to jump, they cannot be tall enough to see through the window. Meaning, no matter how much they try to do everything, there is currently no place for the European Union at the table where the real negotiations are taking place about this war and Ukraine's future. It will still be decided at American-Russian negotiations when there can be peace again and what the security situation will look like here in Central Europe. The European Union is not taken seriously today by any major player in global politics. If anyone didn't believe this before, read the Americans' national security strategy. There is an increasingly spreading war madness prevailing here in Brussels, such a war madness with which they want to drag every European country into war. There's only one way for Hungary to stay out of all this, and that is to continue to have a sovereign national government in Hungary. Brussels' biggest problem currently is that it cannot drag Europe into war and cannot bring Ukraine into the European Union. And they cannot because we are currently preventing this, the sovereign national Hungarian government. And that's why the Brussels people are doing everything to ensure that a government executing Brussels' will comes to power in Budapest. This will be what's at stake in April, because here in Brussels they are preparing for a long-term war situation. Therefore, as they said at last year's NATO Foreign Ministers' consultation, even if there is a peace agreement, we must still prepare for hostile relations with the Russians. Here they now said that even if, for instance, the Americans lift the sanctions against the Russians, we must persist with economic measures against the Russians, which incidentally cause the greatest damage to the European economy itself. This is where we stand currently. I raise that we continue to consider it necessary for Ukraine to account for European Union funds, for the Ukrainians to account for the money they have received so far from the European Union, because this latest corruption scandal clearly shows that a very large part of this European Union money probably went to maintaining the corruption system. A significant part of this money could have become a victim of corruption in Ukraine, and European people do not work. The European economy does not function so that we finance Ukrainian corruption from it. Briefly, I wanted to say this much. If the journalists sitting here have any questions, I'm completely happy to answer. So Esther will start. Please go ahead.
I am Baraksi Esther. Regarding enlargement, I would first ask that we have already seen a date, according to which Ukraine could already join from January 1st, 2027, so to the European Union, so in little more than a year. Has any concrete or less concrete comment been made in the room about this, and that Donald Trump will convince Viktor Orban to drop his veto? Have you heard about such an initiative? The other, if Russia implements countermeasures due to the confiscation of Russian central bank assets, or let's say keeping them frozen, how does this affect Hungary from an economic perspective, meaning the Hungarian operating capital in Russia? And the third would relate to the mass killing in Australia. That we know there are two Hungarian victims, two Hungarian citizens from beyond the border. Do you know more about them? Thank you very much.
I am Sandor Zeros from Euronews. Regarding peace negotiations, I would like to ask and to supplement Esther's question. So there is talk about Ukraine's EU membership being part of this peace plan. If peace in Ukraine depends on this, is Hungary willing to consider questioning its veto regarding Ukrainian accession? My other question is about the Beneš decrees in Slovakia. A new law has been created that threatens with imprisonment those who question the Beneš decrees. Does the Hungarian government protest about this to Slovakia? Or will you summon the Slovak ambassador to Hungary?
Thank you very much for the questions. Regarding the answers, I can say the following. Regarding European Union enlargement, the situation is that although the Ukrainians think they decide about this, but this is not the case. We decide about it. Europeans and we Hungarians decide. About whether Ukraine can be a member of the European Union, it is completely irrelevant to me what President Zelensky says. It is completely irrelevant what the Ukrainian foreign minister says. Now here the Ukrainian foreign minister spoke today as if the video was on, as if he were already a European Union member state, and he commented on this decision saying that they do not support the European Union separating the Ukrainians and Moldovans' accession process. This is a very interesting comment, but it has no significance considering that Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. So this is a European Union decision. The Hungarian people decide, not the Ukrainians. And as long as we are in government, Ukraine will not be a member of the European Union. This is completely clear. This is one of the reasons why Brussels is doing everything to ensure that there is a different government in Hungary from April, because that government would then allow Ukraine to enter the European Union, since that other party, who is our opponent, even conducted a consultation with people about this and discovered in themselves the decision that they will indeed support Ukraine's European Union accession. Well, we won't. So as long as we are in government, Ukraine will not be a member of the European Union. Everyone can be quite sure of this. And these illusions always come that Donald Trump will convince the Prime Minister about this. You know, we can already see, I don't know, in Bloomberg or which extremely credible medium, an almost word-for-word transcript of an Orban-Trump phone conversation where this was the topic. But then, of course, it became clear to everyone that there was no such phone conversation. So I understand the illusions, but these are not worth chasing. There was a personal meeting between the President and the Prime Minister recently. This didn't happen there either, so I think they shouldn't bet on this. And peace certainly won't depend on this, because Ukraine is not at war with a European Union member state. And those countries that really have a role in achieving peace here are also not members of the European Union. So I consider this a false approach. Now, regarding possible Russian countermeasures, I want to clarify the following. Hungary does not support the Brussels people taking the frozen Russian state assets. We don't support it. We don't support it for numerous reasons. We posed a clear question to the Russians that if the European Union makes such a decision about frozen Russian assets that it takes them, Then will Russian countermeasures be uniform against European Union member states? Or will Russian countermeasures take into account the position of the given country on this issue? And the Russians' answer was clear. Russian countermeasures will take into account what position the given country represented in this matter. One consequence of this is that last week I was in Moscow with a business delegation featuring the leaders of 34 companies, the largest ever, where we already discussed the development of Hungarian-Russian cooperation to be conducted in the forthcoming New World Economic and Trade Order. I would have another announcement here, if you allow. President Donald Trump previously declared the Antifa movement a terrorist organization in a decree. We did this too in Hungary. And now we have initiated, specifically on the 10th, a few days ago officially, in written form, that the European Union also include Antifa in its own terror regime. In other words, classify Antifa as a terrorist organization. Well, now it will become clear what people really think about terrorism, what they really think about violence, what they really think about democracy. We call on the European Union to classify Antifa as a terrorist organization at the European level, based on the official Hungarian proposal. Regarding Australia, I can say the following. First of all, everyone was shocked by the news. We Hungarians consider violent events against religious groups unacceptable. We take action against terrorism and all forms of violence. And in Hungary, there is zero tolerance against anti-Semitism. We expressed our condolences. This has already happened almost in a letter. Naturally, we sympathize with the families of the victims. We wish the injured a speedy recovery, and we wish the families much strength in the difficult period ahead. Unfortunately, I can confirm the news that there are 2 Hungarian victims of this brutal attack. One of them is a Hungarian national Holocaust survivor from Upper Hungary, Slovakia, who is from Komárom incidentally, if this much personal detail is permissible to include. So you should know that I myself am from Komárom. So unfortunately, this terrorist act did indeed claim 2 Hungarian victims. Naturally, we will provide all assistance to the relatives of the Hungarian victims, regardless of whether they were Hungarian citizens or not. Sandor, did you have another question? Let me say the following, that if nothing else, in the last 15 years, everyone should know about the national government that we provide and will provide all support to Hungarian communities beyond the borders. The Hungarian communities beyond the borders also know that as long as there is a national government in Budapest, they can count on us in everything. I find it somewhat distasteful, and perhaps also lacking credibility, that those are now calling us to account, who argued against dual citizenship, who argued against the voting rights of Hungarians beyond the borders. Those are now making noise, who argue against financial support provided to Hungarians beyond the borders. And those are trying to hold us accountable, who support the Ukrainians regarding European Union membership, regardless of how they treat the Hungarian national community. I want to make clear that the Hungarians in Upper Hungary, Slovakia, as before, can also count on the Hungarian government's support in every respect going forward. Therefore, we are continuously analyzing the legal situation that has developed. We are in constant contact with the leaders of the Alliance, party representing Hungarians in Upper Hungary, as I am in constant contact with the Slovak political leaders as well. I have already spoken with the foreign minister several times about this issue, most recently a few minutes ago here in Brussels. I also spoke with the president of the Slovak parliament. They all assured me that this regulation is not directed against the Hungarian national community. However, this regulation is there Therefore, we are continuing the legal and political analysis of the situation as closely as possible in the coming days as well. And naturally, our commitment has not changed in terms of ensuring that not a single Hungarian person should suffer any harm as a result of this new law either. So, consultation and situation analysis continues with the leaders of the party representing Hungarians in Upper Hungary. Situation analysis with the Slovak government continues, and I don't want to interfere in Slovak domestic politics naturally. But it seems that there is also a party there that only discovers in opposition that Hungarians live in Upper Hungary. So I think this much should be added to the complete situation assessment. So Hungarians in Upper Hungary can count on us. We will protect them. Naturally, we will use all legal and political tools to ensure that Hungarians in Upper Hungary do not suffer any harm, and consultation with the Slovak government is continuous.